Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled How to Write a Mobile Healthcare App Development Brief, the 12 Steps to Success, but We're Afraid to Ask. Brought to you by Integrated Change and PharmaIQ. I'm your host, Andrea Charles, editor for PharmaIQ, www.pharmaiq.com. This is the most comprehensive guide to app development for non-developers in the healthcare marketplace right now. But just before we start, I wanted to remind everyone that this is an interactive platform, so feel free to ask questions at any time via the Q&A chat box. I would now like to introduce you to your expert speaker today, Scott Haig, Development Director for Integrated Change. Scott, we're delighted that you can join us all. When you're ready, please begin.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. That's great. Yes. Thanks everyone for attending this afternoon. As Andrew has rightly said, this is a presentation on how to write your healthcare app brief. I'm Scott, owner and development director of Integrated Change. We're going to be using a hashtag this afternoon for the event. So if you want to follow us on Twitter and use the hashtag also as well. We've got quite a lot to get through, so I think time-wise this will probably run to around about 35, 40 minutes or so. So just before we get into the presentation, I just wanted to set a few expectations about what this webinar isn't. And I was speaking to one of my clients last week, and he thought how to write a brief was pretty much going to be something like an English lesson, and it really isn't. There's definitely no text here, but I think he took the title of the webinar a bit too literally. And also expectations, you don't have to be a designer or user experience expert. Maybe you are, and you don't have to be a developer or understand the technical language, because that's completely irrelevant when we're writing the brief at this stage. But maybe you are a developer as well, and you want to get some of your clients into line. So what this webinar is, I'll take you through the 12 items that you really must include in writing your healthcare app brief. Essentially, it's the why, the where, the when, the what, and the who. And what you'll find is when we go through these 12 items, it's really going to start to get you thinking and validating some of your ideas. And in some cases, it actually brings you to the conclusion that an app for your healthcare organization isn't the way forward. And we often find that with some of the briefs that we receive. And when we go through the 12 steps, you should probably, when you're writing your brief, probably order your brief in these steps in the order that they appear, because it's very logical. It's going to be a practical webinar. There's going to be links of useful tools, documents for you to take away and use at the end of this. I'm not going to insult your intelligence, because you probably come on this webinar because you've got an idea for an app. So I'm not going to throw a load of market statistics at you. There are some stats, but you probably know some of this already. And ultimately, by the end of it, you'll have essentially a means of creating a blueprint for your product. So any webinar wouldn't be a webinar without a few slides on what we do, and I'll keep it ultra brief because there is a lot to go through. So just a quick sentence, I think, sums up really what Integrated Change does. We move healthcare organizations out of paper-intensive, heavy workflow processes into one that encompasses a digital approach. And we need to understand that we want to build products that people have a desire and a need to use. And of course, that includes mobile applications. That's a major part of our business, along with developing websites and also healthcare marketing. We don't stray away from healthcare. We're completely focused 100% on this. We've developed well in excess of 70 projects. I've spent 18 years in digital. And we've seen things change ever since the first iPhone was launched. So why are we doing this particular webinar? When I was writing the white paper, which goes with this webinar, which you'll have a copy of afterwards, I was sort of thinking, well, there's a few good reasons, and there's a number of issues in developing an app, and I think it actually stems down from part of the foundations, which is the brief. Now, in my time of working in digital, I've seen absolutely wonderful to the most bizarre, outright terrible project briefs. And I kid you not, I have actually had a meeting with a chap who came with a brief on a napkin, and he was ultimately very serious about the project, and I actually wasn't. I told him to go away and develop a brief, which he duly did. But communication as well is a key thing, and I think that's very often disjointed between what the client wants and what the developer thinks. And actually building a brief will create a stronger relationship between you and your developers, whether that's an external agency or internal, and it does bond that brief, that sort of relationship together. Now, in terms of the brief itself, there's no industry standard, there's no conformity to work to. But I think, why would you want to spend money on something that may not be right from the outset and isn't planned with solid foundations? And it's kind of like saying we're going to build a house here and then think about it later. And it may be the case that you've already got a project in existence, an app is out there, and you feel that it's actually just fallen from the edge already. And a brief can help to tighten that up as well. And the problem I have sometimes in healthcare is that it's too IT-led. IT takes the front lead, and it should never be like that. It should be user-driven. And also, once it's been built, then what happens then? Do you know? So why are you probably attending this webinar? A few reasons here. Probably your boss has told you to go away, develop an app. You don't know where to start. You need to apply for funding. You've got a great idea, and you need to convince the board. You've got a project for your hospital, your patients, your clinic. Maybe you're an agency and you're trying to get your clients in line, or maybe you're from one of these countries, which is the top 5 countries for mHealth innovation in Europe, and finally the UK is good at something. This was a report actually came out yesterday from Research to Guidance, and it was a survey from 5,000 developers and healthcare professionals, and they looked at numerous metrics, and you can see in the top right the countries that offer the best market conditions for mobile health app companies. And that's a real interesting insight into how ready European countries really are to adopt mHealth. And there is a major play in the EU at the moment for mobile health, and we wrote about it there, which you can see at the bottom left, which is a link to our website. And you may have got the Holy Grail. So your customers have come and they're asking you for an app, and wow, you've made it. Well done, but you still actually got a lot to do, and you need to develop and validate all of these ideas, because developing an app can really feel like a leap of faith. Actually, it shouldn't, and sometimes it feels like you're really up against it as well, and maybe you're trying to refresh a project, or you've got a new idea, but you've got this huge organization, this huge challenge you're trying to push against. So I use the term, and I'll be using this throughout, and I use this term business plan. You're probably thinking, well, forget a business plan. I just want to develop an app, for crying out loud. Well, a business plan is basically the foundations of success for what you want to do, and putting your ideas down on some paper and then discussing it. So I'll be using the term business plan quite a lot. And remember, when you create the brief, you won't just be sharing it with your developers or your design team. Your brief could happen to land on someone else's desk internally from another office. So it could happen to be circulated around your organization. So when I talk about business plans, you can go away and you can have a look at some of these. We love the Happy Startup Canvas at the bottom right. It's so easy to use, helps you to get your ideas down at your idea stage, put your values, your story, your purpose and vision. These are all free to use, really great tools. And you just remember that your product is going to be defined by the decisions you make, and that starts at the brief. It's not about dumping all the features down onto a piece of paper and what you want it to do. I read a blog post yesterday from a site, and they said a successful application starts at putting down what you want to appear in the app, the features. And I just couldn't. I disagree with that, and it's not right, because there's so much more to it. So it's not a technical requirement document or a feature dump. You must always dare to say I don't know first, and that must be a mantra that goes throughout this project. So when you enter it, don't go in with ideas and because just assume that you don't. So only a small amount of conceptual inquiry at this stage, from your perspective, will go a really long way. And if you're a great company, and a lot of you probably are, then just remember what makes you great and keep applying those particular fundamentals. So, first point, users and marketing. And you're probably thinking, why would I want to put this into a brief? Well, I mean, your users are going to be really important, and developers, designers, project project managers, account managers, etc. You know, they want to be involved and they want to share your goal as well, and they care as much as you do. And you know, if you give them some insights into your users and marketing, which will have a cost, then you will find you'll get a much, much better relationship between them. And you've got to put your value down there too, because customers will download your app for their reasons and not yours. So that's really important. If, for example, you're stuck in your day job, you don't know what to do, I would say just get out of the engine room and onto the bridge and have a look around at your customers. You've got all this data available to you. Plenty of free data you can look at to understand the behavior of your customers. Look at Google Analytics, for example. That provides a great wealth of information, demographics, behavior. Have you got any existing apps you can look at to get your data? Look at your social channels. Look at the likes, the followers, who's following who's following them. What information can we pull out about our particular users? And if you don't know, then just go and ask. We use TollDaddy a lot. It's a very cheap way of actually getting interactive surveys out. Ask some 15 questions. We recently just finished a survey with a clinic in London, and we had an iPad app for 15 questions in the waiting room, and we had captive audience there waiting to tell us what they were expecting from mobile healthcare, and we got some great results from this. With users, what you're trying to do is build up a persona of what that particular user is. You know, who is your ideal customer profile? How can you target them? You can use this persona sheet, which will be in your pack once we finish this. We use it internally, and there's no reason why you couldn't either. And it just helps you to get down who you're actually going to be targeting. A lot of people in their minds think, well, we know who our customers are, but actually when you start to go through this exercise, you'll find that there are some opportunities where you can go out and target new customers as well. And if you don't want to go down that route and you still want more data, then I would definitely recommend choosing some of these survey systems. Google's on there as well. That's free at the moment. OnePoll is fantastic. Pollfish. Go out and ask simple surveys. They'll do the work for you. You'll get the results in a week or two. And users do come externally, of course, but also we must look internally as well. And I'm a massive believer in this. Stakeholders can appear in the most unlikely places. So when you're trying to identify your customers, consider a quick scan around you. So look at your sales teams, consultant liaison, customer services, call centers, receptionists. We used the receptionist extensively in the project because she actually had more of an insight into the patients who were coming in than actually most people. So she was fantastic. And look at these areas and start to build up the persona and start to put this into item 1. And at this point, it's probably a good time to try and recruit a testing panel for your app. And you should do that internally. Remember, developers don't test in the real world, they test in simulation mode. So once you've got a good idea of your users, maybe you want to organize a workshop with them, help them to understand what your visualization for the product is. You can do this via a mood board, which is very simple to do, helps you to show your goal of what you're trying to achieve. Here are some really nice ones that we use. Nice is nice. It's a drag and drop interface. You can make stunning mood boards in minutes, and that helps you to get your vision across so people can understand what you're trying to achieve, and that can actually, must certainly go in your brief because a designer will want to see that as well. Marketing, again, you're probably thinking, why am I putting this in the brief? Well, there are costs to this and development costs to this as well. This is missed so many times, I don't really understand it. There is an ROI in building an app, whether it's free or not, or whether it's for medical use or not. There must be some kind of measurement. What is your ROI? How are you going to measure productivity? How are you going to measure readmission rates being reduced because the app has been launched? That all has a marketing aspect to it as well. With marketing, and here are a few tools as well, acquisition. So if you're going to go out there and try and find some users, again, there are development costs to this in terms of putting it into your brief. There are some really great, some of these are free actually, some of these free resources where you can use Journalisted. Maybe you can look at what journalists are talking about, and then you can contact them for free. You can look at blogger outreach at Group High. You can look at Help a Reporter, Flatlist, Backtweets. These are all great tools to build up your marketing plan before your app is actually developed. Maybe you want to look at your competitors. If you go onto App Annie, you can actually do a competitor analysis of certain keywords. And then, of course, there's retention. This must go in your brief. How are you going to retain your existing customers? Or are you going to do it via push messaging, for example? We use Urban Airship for our push notification systems. And remember, there is a development cost in this. It just doesn't happen. And you're going to have to factor this in as well, because you're going to have to spend time working out what that engagement is going to look like once the app is launched. Are you going to integrate it into an email campaign? Again, there's costs for this. Look at Campaign Monitor, GetDrip as well, which has a free trial. That's a great email integration system into apps and then into your CRM. And then, of course, you need to measure this as well. Who's going to do this, by the way? Are you asking the development team to do this, or are you going to do it? Look at how you're going to measure this. Use tools like Flurry and Fixu. They have SDKs. We use Google Analytics for our apps. That's free. Apple have just launched their own beta version of Analytics, so you can see how many people are viewing your app on the store. And you can, on here, the Rater.Localytics, you can actually type in someone's listing and see how well it's performing. So it's very important to understand this. There are costs to this, and if you do it after the event, then you're going to actually start to impact some of your actual launch dates, which is the next slide, which is be prepared for changes, because the software world can be quite harsh sometimes, and be realistic as well. So plan for uncertainties, and you need to understand in your mind what a development cycle looks like. I'm not saying that you understand it in depth, but this is what we do with our clients, and we take them through and we sign off at each stage. So if you get a good idea of what's involved, then you can replicate that and put that in your brief, and that will be in your launch date, and that must go in your brief for certain. Quickly, licenses. Don't get to the very end of your app without having a license. You need to apply for an Apple developer license if it's iOS. That's running at 4 weeks at the moment. So we've seen it where we've got to the end of a project and they don't have a developer license, and their launch date's gone right out the window, and that's not good. With your launch as well, just as a little tip, I think, what can you piggyback on? So when you're launching the app, think about what's happening, what's coming up. We've got the developer conference in June with Apple. Android have got a conference coming up shortly. We've got an iPhone 7, 6, a big iPad coming out. What can you piggyback on? But also be wary of this, because when you're developing an app and you're in the middle of it, and then a new iOS 9 comes out, that's going to really affect your launch date, because iOS 9 could impact how it's being coded. Item number 2 is why. So remember, people don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. So make sure you know why exactly you are going to develop the application. This needs to go in the brief, because developers and designers, we need to understand why you're doing this. What are your goals, and let's see if we can meet them with you. I would recommend, just on this item alone, is watch this presentation by Simon Sinek. It's a brilliant, one of the most watched TED presentations there is. He talks about why it's more important than how and what, and it's such a great presentation. You can take some of those points away and put it into your overall proposition. Item number 3, objectives. Of course, that has to go into the brief, and you need to put this down. What are your objectives? Sometimes they become too diluted and disillusionized by technology. Now, forget technology. Put that to the side for 1 minute. Make sure you've got really strong objectives, because if you don't have an objective, and we all miss the mark, then you could be part of some of these stats where if you look at this one, for example, less than 50% of mHealth apps are downloaded 500+ times. It's a scary world out there, and 2/3 are abandoned after the 10th use. So the question of engagement after it's been installed comes into play. So don't miss the mark on objectives. And with that, you must really focus on just solving high-value problems only. think about what we call the minimal viable product. What must you do first to meet the objective, and then you build other features and other things into it too. So there's no harm in thinking big and starting small, of course, but with development, the best thing to do is to fail fast with small iterations, and that's going to cost you less. And make sure you prioritize this as well and put that in your brief. You know, think about, are you going to interoperate with other systems, external systems or other systems internally? You need to prioritize that and start to talk to people in your organization about what you're doing. This is missed a lot, not a boat on some water, but having a clear purpose. It's quite, developing an app it can be a really stressful process, and it does take a lot of time. You're going to have to dedicate time to this. So always make sure you've got a clear purpose and it brings real meaning to the project. You know, write it down and put it in the brief and make sure we're all following the same purpose and we don't get disjointed by going off another angle. Item 4, the location. Yeah, massive one for me. Think about where will the app be used. So you need to think about the scenarios where it will be used, how the app will behave when it doesn't have a connection. Will it be used inside a hospital where Wi-Fi isn't available? Will it be in radiology? Will it be in the reception? Will it be out in the sticks? Think about the location context, and that context of where it's going to be used will also affect how you're going to reach that customer once it's launched. Does it need to be online or offline? Do you need to store data on there? These are things that will affect development. You need to put it in early and have those discussions with your development agency or your team internally, because that's massively, massively important. Item number 5 is regulation and compliance. Okay, a lot of changes happening here. I can't speak for the US system and the FDA, but from what I've read, it's pretty much the same as the UK. In fact, it's just one big, massive grey area. No one really knows what's happening, and no one really knows a lot of answers to a lot of the questions. But if you happen to come under the regulation and compliance umbrella and you need a CE mark, then you know, you could kill your project right from the very start if you don't understand that. So here are just a few things that are happening. This is UK, this is European-centric, in fact. So just a bit of an overview of what's happening. So the Medical Device Directive, you know, when is the software a medical device? So governing medical apps in the UK is determined at the European level. But bizarrely, in this directive, medical apps are not mentioned, which is strange. In the UK, it's NHRA. They're responsible for the interpretation and enforcing of the UK legislation. But my concern with this is that there are so many healthcare apps appearing. They just don't have the resources or the staff to keep up with this, which is a bit of a shame. British Standards, they've recently launched, this month in fact, PAS 277, which is a set of standards for health and wellness apps. And we're a BSI member and we welcome this with real open arms. This sets out a set of quality standards and aims to ensure that public and healthcare professionals can have access to apps that are safe. And it's such a great move. We've recently blogged on this as well. Big change coming is kite marking. The National Information Bureau is going through a kite marking process. It's covered by the Department of Health in their Personalised Health and Care Framework for 2020. And kite marking basically, well, it's a national approach to the accreditation of apps. And it will publish proposals by June 2015. And then the kite marking of apps will actually begin by the end of 2015. So apps that go through a kite marking process in the UK can have the NHS brand associated to it if it's an NHS framework, and be available through NHS choices. So there's a good marketing spin to be done there for sure. I would probably look at this link which talks about the MDD directive. There's some good information on there. But if you don't get a feel for regulation and you don't talk to your developers and your designers about it, you're really risking actually putting your project at high risk. So we're coming to item 6. We're halfway through. I'm going at quite a fast pace here, so hopefully you can keep up with me. Item 6 is is all about a technique we use called Moscow. Now, at this point, you've probably already got a decent idea of what you want to be included with the application, and for sure you should, because we've already talked about surveys, we've already looked at analytics for customers, you've maybe done some surveys yourself externally, so you've got a good idea of what you want to put in, but to start and prioritize those is the next phase. So when we say M at the start of this letter, that which word is must. So what features must be included? What high-value problem will that solve? And then we go on to should, high priority. Then we go to could, it's desirable but not necessary. And then wants, which are nice to have, and maybe that will help you build a product roadmap later on. We use this technique a lot. We used it a few months ago when we did a workshop with the National Children's Bureau and Anna Freud Center. And you can see, we went through a lot of exercises here. Basically, this was just a whole day of post-it noting and putting ideas and getting the users into a workshop and asking them what features they would want, and then we categorized them via post-it notes into the Moscow framework. It's a simple, low-cost way of building out your features, and developers will want to know what features we must build from version 1. If you're running out of ideas, we also use something called 635 brainwriting. So I guess it's so simple. I mean, you have 6 people, 5 minutes. They write down 3 ideas, and then they pass this round. And you have 6 rounds of 5 minutes, and you get 108 ideas. Now, a lot of them will be rubbish, but actually you can start to filter those ideas down. So workshops, Moscow method. The Moscow method is such a simple tool. I definitely recommend it. Once you've done that exercise, put it into your brief and be clear about that as well. The next item is devices and platforms. Well, it can be, you could hold on this point for such a long time, but we've already talked about making sure you understand your users, and you should have asked in the survey, what phone do they use. From the surveys we've done, typically iOS is coming out, and we've done them in healthcare professionals and with patients, and iOS really comes out at the front of the leading device. My advice when you're thinking about iOS and Android, and when you're putting this in the brief, never develop on both at the same time, because you run the risk of actually losing cash and losing a lot of time. You should focus just on one standard platform and then build out another one. So never develop on both platforms at the same time, unless you're willing to actually spend twice as much time and twice as much money on fixing the feedback. Just a quick point on operating system adoption, because again, just give you a good idea of this. If you look on the left, you look at Apple, a lot of the high adoption coming into their new operating system, iOS 8, and iOS 9 will be out in September, but 81% are running the very latest features which you can actually start to integrate into your app. And then when we look at Android, for example, Android 5, which is the latest operating system version, 10% are only using it, which is a very low figure. So you need to be aware also what operating system you want to target when you launch, because Android 5 brings in lots of different changes, design changes, as well as new development changes, as it did to Android 4. And there's a preconception that Android users use massive phones, and they don't. 83% of them are on a 4-inch size phone. That has an impact on how you would design it. So operating systems aside, do you want to create a smartphone app or a tablet app? And the two are very different. Obviously, with a tablet, you have much more real estate to play around with, but obviously that's a new development cost. So I would say think about universal apps, which basically, we're talking about iOS here. In iOS 8, universal apps is made much, much easier. So you can have a smartphone app on an iPhone 6, for example, and have it universally made available and optimized on an iPad. And you can clearly see that's a growing trend. This was taken last year, so these figures are probably different. This will lower your cost as well if you want to do a universal app. And then at some point, think about a unique, completely different version for iPad. But I'll put this in here because I think it's an important point. Item number 8 is content. This item you know, it's about as elusive of some of the other points I've already mentioned. I can't believe it gets missed a lot, in fact. You know, content is such a major part of web development, and actually such a major part of mobile app development as well, because the structure and the framework is all built around what content is actually going to go inside the app. So when you're building the brief, and you do need to tell developers and designers about what content is going to go in, because clearly they need to know and they need to build the framework and structure. This is a great exercise for you as well to refresh any content you've got. So key points here I would think about, and there's 4 of them in terms of content, is the content going to be dynamic or static? So are you just going to show your content in the app, and then when it changes, you just update the app and you let it go through? Or do you want to put in the content dynamically, so when it does change, app users see it in real time? You need to be clear on that in the brief, because there's clearly development costs and time in doing either one of those. Next slide, sorry, the next point, sorry, is new content required completely? Who's going to write it? Are you expecting the development team to write it? The designers? Are you going to do it? It's specific to the app. How much content will there be? If there's going to be pop-ups throughout your app, think about the content that will be shown in the pop-ups as well. Will you link off to a website? Maybe you've got an existing website with lots of information on, and you don't really want to rewrite this for the app, and that's fine, and that's okay. But again, you need to think about how this is going to work in your mind. So don't take a user out of the app. Show the website that you're linking off to within the app. And please, please, please make sure that if you are linking off to an app, linking off to a website externally, make sure it's mobile optimized. It's such a bad experience to be in a lovely, beautiful app and then go out and see a website that is not friendly on a mobile device. And images and videos, you know, are you putting video into your app? Will it be, how big is this video? Are they going to be embedded? Is it going to be too big, which means people have to download it on Wi-Fi, so they can't download it on cellular? The images, do you have the copyright to these? Where are they? Are they hosted? How big are they? Do they change? So think about these images. Provide some samples to the development team and the video, and provide some of the content as well. Video as well, just a quick point on this. Snapchat launched, sorry, they came out with a statistic on Friday, which talked about videos that are shot in a vertical position are viewed 9 times more than videos shot horizontally. So if your application is all about, let's say it's a rehab video or patient care or some kind of discharge app or treatment section, make sure your video is probably completed vertically. Content as well. Big opportunity in search for content. Try and get your app visible in search. It's called app indexing. It's by Google. It's only available on Android at the moment. It will be coming to iOS soon. What it means is Google will index your content of your apps in search, just like what happens now with websites. You go onto search, you type in, show me this, and a website appears. Now, over time, what will happen, apps will start to appear in search. For us, this is the future of search because we're all going mobile, desktop will always be there. But this is just another avenue to think about. The reason you need to think about this is because there is a development cost in actually putting in app indexing, and this doesn't happen instantly. But you should really consider it. There are a few resources here with these links. One, we've talked about it already on the blog, and the other one is the developers site of Google. It's not a big development cost, but it's a cost still, and the time. So you need to think about that as well. Item number 9 is called paper sketching. What we mean here is basically a screen layout using something that's called a pencil or a pen and some paper. I'm not saying that you need to be a graphic design specialist, but if you've got some ideas of what you want to see on the screen, then put it down on paper and share it with your development team and your designers and people internally. You can use this sheet here, which is a sketch sheet. Print it out as many times as you like. Use it in the workshops. We've done this in our workshops several times, and some of the suggestions we've got back on these sketch sheets have been phenomenal. We didn't even think that our users would want something like this. So put that in there, show some examples. We use InVision and Origami for our mock-ups, but we internally do paper sketching as well before we even get to difficult types of prototyping. So I'll definitely use that. We're coming into the last few points now. I am speaking very quickly because of time pressures and a lot of information to go through here. Databases, everyone is yawning. At this point alone, you can strike the fear of God into people, databases. It also means that you may have to tell IT about your dirty little secret that you want to develop an app, and that just opens the gates of hell. But it's so important to put this in the brief because it's going to have a huge, huge impact upon your actual application. And moreover, I think it introduces the conversation about data, which is what everyone really should be having. So the next slide is just some sort of like a mini to-do list, I guess, which I'm not expecting you to be IT experts in this. You may want to pass it to your IT department, of course. But if you are integrating to a database, well, first of all, will the app connect to a database? That's the first question. What is the data that's in there? Who owns this? What type of database is it? Is external access allowed? Can your development team gain access? If you are giving people access externally, do you need to tick a security governance with your team? What is the internal data policy? Should you store data for so long and then delete it? The app has to work in that way. It has to follow these procedures. What data stays on the device, if any? 36% of people don't lock their mobile phone devices with a PIN or passcode. In the UK, that's 45% of people don't lock their phone with a passcode. And sorry, but women, 54% of women don't do this in the UK. So if you've got data staying on the device, then make sure you've got a solution to actually drop the app out after so many minutes or to remove the data that's on there automatically. External data compliance, must we meet one? You may want to look at this link at the bottom, which is about the Caldecott principles of data. Essentially, it's the fundamentals of the Data Protection Act in the UK. You must look at that. Once you understand and you know that it will connect to the database, you need to get hold of a sample database extract, and you need to put that in your brief. We need to understand how it's structured. Your team, your development team will need to understand how to go and access this. This, again, is just something to think about. You probably need to put it in your brief and be clear about this as well. So when you integrate into a database, there are two basic points when integration is actually planned, and these points actually can be missed. Or it's hoped that all of the systems involved will just simply sync and the data will share the same thing everywhere and then the world is good. But unfortunately, these 2 points are missed every single time we see a brief. So think about integration. Which system is the master of the data, and will the information move one way or in both ways? What I would recommend is you be clear on this, and if you have a good relationship with your development team, get a conversation going between your internal IT guys and the chats and the teams, and a conversation with your development teams as well. In the brief, you probably need to consider this. Does your app need terms and conditions, and does it need a privacy policy? Most likely it will do, and you need to think about this. We've reached the end of some projects, and an app was rejected because it didn't have terms and conditions, although it had a privacy policy. Now that had a big impact on their launch. So you would basically be safe in having both of these within it. So just be wary of that. And if you're part of a larger organisation, these T's and C's and the privacy policy don't reflect what you have on your website. They'll be different. So you may need sign up from an internal team. There's some links there too. Okay, last few points, last few slides. Hosting, is it required? Yes. Something has to be hosted. Even the API for connecting into a database that has to sit somewhere, has to be hosted somewhere. So who's going to pay for this? And can development teams get access to your hosting account? If it's an NHS system, then check with corporate IT because it may need to be N3 compatible. And when you do have hosting, what you should do is have multiple environments. So what I mean by that is you have a live system where all your end users are using it. features, and actually to test if a bug is fixed or not, you should have an environment called testing. So in essence, you need two hosting environments. One is live and one is testing. And that just means that you can test all the new features and stuff without affecting the real users. So hosting is a key element to put in. And the last point is item 12, support, monitoring, and analytics. You've got to put this in the brief because development teams won't support your app for nothing, and it depends on what they're going to support. And who's going to look at the monitoring of the App Store? Is it you? Do you have time? And what about the analytics as well? And quite often when an app is launched, we have this type of syndrome which, my job is finished. Let's sit back, put our feet up, as Chuck is doing here. But actually, you're really just starting, and you're starting out on a journey which is going to take up a lot of your time and resources, and you're going to be quite pressurized. And someone sends you a message to say it's broken, or someone puts a scathing review, a competitor puts a scathing review on the App Store. What happens? Who is going to support this particular application? And then what happens if the app goes down? This is certainly not the best principle to use, but you've got to have a support framework in place. Because no software product will ever be 100% fixed. Look at all the updates that come through on your phone. Look at all the updates from Windows on Macs. It's never 100%. Something will always happen. And in the instance that it does, you've got to have a framework in place to A, listen to the feedback, and then B, act on that particular feedback. Going to monitor your analytics. What operating system are you going to target? How will you get feedback from the app? Are you going to look at it on the App Store or tell people to do it in the app? And if you've got a phone number, who's going to answer that particular telephone call when it comes in? So we've flown through this. That is pretty much that is the end of it, actually. They are the 12 items you must include. I guess I'm doing a bit of a Chuck Norris, really. I suppose my job is done here. What I want to do with this webinar is just to sort of think about it slightly differently in terms of a brief. Start to get you to think on a bit wider scale, because you should be validating everything you do during writing your brief. And have a good sense. And I think in healthcare, what we're trying to do and what you should be trying to do with your application is two things. One, you want to change behavior. And in healthcare, that is what we want to try and do anyway. You want to try and change your behavior, and you want to try and motivate that change. So they're the very two things you need to do. You're going to do that. And hopefully these 12 items that I've gone through will give you that information. The slide decks will be available on SlideShare. If you're in London in June, we're exhibiting. I'll be part of a live debate at the Cope Practice Show. You can come and see us at the London Excel. But that's me finished. So thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Scott. That was really interesting. As Scott indicated, we've now reached the Q&A section of the webinar. So please enter your questions now via the chat box. Great. Well, we've already had a couple of questions come in while you were speaking. So the first question for you, Scott, you mentioned the term MVP a few times. Can you just elaborate on what this means, please?
Yeah, so that's the minimal viable product. So that comes back to where you should focus your attention. What problem are you solving? If you're not solving a problem, then I forget about developing an application, because for me, and us as an agency, there's no point. So where does the problem lie? And quite often what you need to do is concentrate on developing an application that meets and overcomes that problem. And that is basically what we define as the minimal viable product. What must you do to meet your minimal objective?
Brilliant. Next question. If the app is going to be used by internal staff, what is the value of completing the persona sheet? We probably know this.
Well, yeah. You may. Well, I think that's an assumption that you probably know who your internal users are, but you should put those assumptions to one side. If it's for internal staff, let's say it's for nurses, for example, then I would probably argue that maybe you don't know their full persona. Maybe you don't know what their objectives and goals will be. So the persona sheet is applicable for internal use as well as external use. And the two users, by the way, are completely different. So yes, you should always do the persona sheet and look at your internal users.
Brilliant. Do you recommend giving the sketch sheet out to all of my staff to get as many ideas as possible?
Yeah, completely. So some of our clients, what they will do is have internal workshops whereby they'll invite so many people from different departments, and they'll just have a really open session, and they use those sketch sheets, and then we'll come out and we'll go through those. So just like the persona sheets, yes, the sketch sheets are really important. And actually, you know, what you're doing is you're engaging with your internal staff, which in some cases, in some places, doesn't happen. So it helps to break down some barriers as well. But yeah, the sketch sheet should be used, and you can use it in lots of different scenarios. But for internal staff as well as external end users, it's massively important.
How big should the brief be? I'm worried it will be a massive document.
Well, it depends on what your project is, and you know, well, if it's going to be a big document, then fine. You know, as long as it's meeting the expectations of what I've set out in the webinar, and you've got all these points in there. You know, I don't want you to go and write a dissertation, you know, but it needs to be as complete as it should be as per your project, and make it as detailed as you can be. Think of it, it's not a brief. In essence, sometimes it's not a brief to give out to developers and designers or your internal development team. You know, it's a brief that you will look back on, and then you'll say, well, we didn't meet that actually, and we didn't do that. So it's also a checklist in some regards as well. But you know, it has to be as detailed as it needs to be. My answer to that question, really.
Brilliant, thank you. So we now have time for a couple more questions, if any more are going to come in. But I guess, Scott, did you have any sort of closing remarks that you wanted to make while we just give a couple more minutes for any more questions to come in?
No, I mean, I've gone through quite a lot. There's quite a lot of detail in here. So I think I've pretty much gone through all of it. I think it's just about making sure that you understand you want to change behavior in people, and you can do that via an application, but you need to motivate that change in behavior, and you need to understand how you're actually going to do that.
Brilliant. Well, if you have any further questions, as you can see, Scott's details are on the screen for you there, so you can email him directly. That concludes today's Q&A section of the webinar. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the organizer, Scott, and Integrated Change. Goodbye.
Thanks, have a good day.
Brilliant. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.